103, 5 Lincoln 102, Lincoln 103 and 102.
Responding to 401 parking structure, section 1 boy.
Henry 8, Henry 9. Respond to gate 437, Bravo, for your dignitary detail. 3K 911, unattended, 400 lower level, near carousel 4, black bag. GTA in progress, 401 parking structure, section 4 boy.
Responding to 401 parking structure, section 1 boy.
415 passenger onboard aircraft.
Control 2 Franklin and around.
484 suspect, is female, Hispanic, 28 years of age, blue jeans, no further.
Control 5 Frank 401 is en route.
Good morning and welcome to this edition of the Private Officer Beat Radio. I'm your host, founder, and CEO of Private Officer International, Rick McCann. We're glad that you're here. I'm glad that you're here. My partners are glad that you're here. We're all glad that we are here this morning on this Monday, the 22nd of June, 2020. This program is being brought to you in part by Private Officer International, a private security and law enforcement organization, Armored College, a public safety institute, and our friends at Body Armor USA. We've got what it takes to protect you. And there are other sponsors who have joined us in recent weeks, and we appreciate all of them. Be sure to check out our website at privateofficer.org today and see who else is helping us to get this radio show online and across the world every week. Well, today, no different than in most radio programs, we really do have a lot to talk about and kind of a short amount of time. I think we could probably spend 3, 4, 5 hours, maybe even the whole day, just sitting here discussing the topics that continue to rise on a daily, almost daily basis in the private security industry, public safety, law enforcement, discussing just yesterday about how many different categories there are in private security. I think if you were to ask someone what a private security officer does, they would just give you that basic guard thing and walks around and does nothing. But there are over 30 categories, and probably even more than that, of areas where private security officers work. Many of them are specialized, and many requiring a lot more training than your basic state regulatory training. And I was discussing this yesterday about how nuclear security and even educational institutes, colleges, public safety and law enforcement departments, airports. TSA is not what most people believe it is. TSA requires a lot of training, hundreds of hours of training given to their agents across the country, and they're not just at the airports. TSA actually is deployed oftentimes at transit stations, bus depots, railroad stations, and on other special assignments. But most people would not know this, and they don't have a clue, actually, to the specificity of all the areas that private security are involved in. Well, today we do have a lot of things to talk about. Now, I do want to immediately give you a heads up of something very special that's happening next Monday, June the 28th, I believe it is, and we're going to be the 29th, I was just corrected. We're going to be doing something very unique and special that I know that you're going to want to be part of, and that is we are going to be doing a roundtable discussion. We've invited all of our private officer members in to the conversation, as well as non-members, and over the weekend sent out announcements to both our members and the public alike. And my understanding is that we do have some reservations and acknowledgments of people who will be part of that discussion. But we have many areas that we want to discuss, not only as the beginning of a conversation, but hopefully to set some new policies. We definitely want to talk about racism and the hidden things that people don't even know that are part of them. We want to talk about what escalation is, how things that we say, our body language, and other things that we do could actually escalate that situation instead of de-escalating that situation. And also, we want to really discuss how the security industry needs to change from a training aspect, from a standard operation aspect, from a philosophy aspect, and we really want to get the views of both the frontline officers, management, company owners, and we've also invited public safety, law enforcement, and even some military personnel to be involved in this conversation. As we know, in the last 3 weeks or so, there's been riots, there's been peaceful protests, there's been massive destruction, arsons, statues torn down, the country torn apart, and a whole lot of things happening. Some are good. Some are not. Some are reasonable, expected, even applauded. Others are not. During the last 3 weeks, we've had over 100 security officers assaulted on the job, all during either riots or as a knee-jerk reaction to attack anyone in uniform. We've had, in the past week, an 85-year-old security officer murdered in Mississippi, just outside of Jackson, and law enforcement and the county prosecutor is calling it an execution. The security officer on duty at an apartment complex, without even considering his age, we know that he was murdered, executed in his vehicle on the post for no reason. Now, we're not going to jump to conclusions. Law enforcement has put the word racism possibly in that equation. We're not sure. We haven't confirmed it. And until we know more, we can't say that that was the reason. But all the evidence on the scene points to a strong possibility of that. We have seen videos this past week of security officers attacked because of their color. And we have also seen security officers attacked just because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time during the riots. Now, one of the things that's very disturbing to me and everyone who's seen this video is an attack on a private security officer in Louisville, Kentucky that happened about a week and a half ago. This security officer was on duty at the Department of Justice building in Kentucky, in Louisville, on duty in uniform, inside the building. He heard and saw a commotion. He came out to see what was happening. Police were engaging protesters, rioters, and they turned their attention to that security officer and fired at him while he was filming the activity. Not knowing, not caring, not even asking what he was doing. He was in full uniform and easily identifiable by anyone who looked. But in this situation, police failed to engage, question, or stop long enough to see who this person was. They just randomly fired upon him. An investigation this past week revealed that they actually fired several rubber bullets that went through a window of the building where the security officer was protecting. An investigation is underway, although the security officer, who was Latino, said, "I don't want prosecution. I'm not looking to be angry or to get revenge or payback. I just want this person to apologize and to realize that even in the heat of the moment, we have to be reasonable and we can't just let our current situation or anger spill over on the innocent people." I totally agree with this, and I am disturbed that happened. This is not the first time. Also, on Thursday night, Friday, in Los Angeles, LA County Sheriff's Department responded to a suspicious call, an armed man call, and at a car repair business, a security officer was stopped by the deputies for an investigation at that location to identify him, and he began running with a gun. At that time, he was shot and killed by deputies in Los Angeles County. There's a large outcry that this was racially motivated because he was a Latino. But put yourself in that position. Put yourself in the shoes of responding officers who are going to a gun call, man with a gun, suspicious activity, and when they approach to question the person, he begins to run with a gun, and at some point, officers felt threatened. I'm not sure of all the details at that point, but they fired upon him, killing him. Our own investigation internally showed that this person was hired privately by the business. He was only 18 years old. He was not licensed as a security officer for a contract, or in California, you have to be licensed as a proprietary security officer through BSIS, the governing regulatory agency in California for private security. As far as what we know, he was not licensed to be a security officer, and he was not old enough to have the firearm. Why he had it, why the business hired him at 18, why all of this occurred, we don't know. But we do know that this is another incident in California and in the U.S. where unregulated security officers, unlicensed security officers are out there on the job without training. And I can't help but to think, had he gone through the class, had he taken the armed security officer class, if he was old enough, he would have understood that he had to identify himself and he had to how to handle the firearm and so on and so forth. And relatives are claiming that he was just a scared teenager. What are you scared of? You're a security officer, supposedly, and law enforcement is addressing you. Nothing to be afraid of. And I'm just curious as to the moments leading up to the shooting, what caused the officers to use that deadly force. A lot happening, a lot of breaking news. We're going to break it down for you today. I also want to talk about another situation that's happening, and that is, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to tell you about something else that has us very, very concerned, and it is the topic of this week. Like I said moments ago, don't miss this roundtable discussion next Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. If you need more information, contact helpdesk at privateofficer.com. Helpdesk at privateofficer.com. We got to take a quick break, but when I come back, I'm going to break down some other things that's happening and really has us very concerned. You're listening to the Private Officer Beat Radio, and we will be right back.
From coast to coast, cops are cracking down on seatbelt violations. Buckle up day and night or expect a ticket. It doesn't matter who you are or where you live, they'll be on the lookout. Cops write tickets to save lives. Click it for ticket.
At Armor College, a public safety institute, we train those who help others. Paramedics and emergency medical technicians, firefighters, police officers, law enforcement, private security, bail enforcement, and those on the front line. Check us out today at armorcollege.org. ARMOUR college.org. We'll even bring the school to you. Armor College, a public safety institute. I just mentioned a few moments ago about the 85-year-old security officer who was gunned down execution style. George David Heron, 85 years old, was shot multiple times, according to the police, while in his vehicle. He posed no threat, and yet he was killed. He is just one of 187 security officer deaths so far in 2020, and we're only halfway through the year. We have not recorded this many security officer deaths since 9/11. We've had several years where it hit 150, but never this extreme so soon. Now, give it, albeit that it was statistically, many of them were related to COVID-19. 150 related to COVID-19. But of the other 37 deaths of security officers, many were by gunfire. And you have to understand that during the past 4 months, hundreds of thousands of businesses have been closed. Thousands of security officers have been laid off. No opportunity for security officers to be involved in any type of deadly force incidents, and yet they were the victims as well. It's very discouraging, and it really causes a pause for us, because we see every day more than 2,500 news resources across the world. We get these in our office. We look at so many different news stories related to private security, public law enforcement, and we look at the events and the incidents occurring, and we see one thing: violence is going up. We know that the contract security officer for the Federal Protective Service that was gunned down in Oakland, California during the protest was targeted. In fact, federal authorities now have made an arrest of 2 suspects. One was an active duty Air Force member, and he targeted that security officer and killed him, but he also killed the deputy sheriff in California, and a second person also involved has been arrested by federal authorities as well. We know that groups have targeted police recently in the last few weeks and private security, and it's only going to get worse. We saw 5 years ago, you may or may not remember, there was several incidents involving mass killings of police officers. One in Dallas, Texas, where police were on an assignment protecting peaceful protesters when a military professional got up into a parking garage as a sniper and killed 5 police officers. And days or a week later, it happened again in Louisiana, where someone who had been trained in the military steadied his rifle and killed 3 or 4 police officers after setting them up. And there's been, countless murders of security officers over the years since we've been doing this for almost 17 years. POI has been around for almost 17 years now. Countless times when security officers were misidentified as law enforcement because of their uniform and they were killed. We even had some people suggest that their uniforms be red or purple or, other colors that did not simulate law enforcement. But you know what? I don't think that would matter. People who are wicked, people who are of the mindset to kill, are going to kill no matter what. And if you represent authority, you're going to be a target. And that is the gospel. That's the truth. This week, we're going to be talking about another area that is very concerning to us because we've had situations happen previously involving security officers being used for evictions. Now, over the years, we've seen security officers arrested, sued, and we've seen one security company have to close down their doors completely because of their involvement in the eviction of tenants at an apartment complex. I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can and cannot do, but because of COVID-19, because of the massive amount of people who lost their jobs, because of the people who were furloughed, many states gave an order that landlords, property owners, could not evict anyone, even at a long-term motel where they are paying weekly or monthly. After a certain amount of time, most states make a difference between a weekly rental and someone who is now a tenant. And in many states, the governors have had an executive order that you cannot evict them. And, they're just now allowing that. In my area on the East Coast, July 1 puts those people again in the sight of evictions and court process. And our experience in the past has shown that private security for apartments and hotels have barged in, broken down doors, physically removed people from the property, and that's very concerning because you don't have that authority, even though you're an agent. We're going to talk about that coming up at the bottom of this program in the fourth quarter of the program, but it is very concerning. And if you're a security officer and your employer or client asks you to physically remove people, don't do it, because that is an assault. You can remove property once the legal court process has been completed, but again, there's a lot more to it than just kicking people out, and we don't want you to get in trouble. We definitely don't want people to get arrested. We're going to talk about that, though, coming up. We do have a lot of breaking news, and I do want to get to that, but we also want to make sure that we extend our help out to you, especially if you're a POI member during this time. We know that a lot of security officers are unemployed, although a lot have gone back to work. In fact, in the last week, sadly, 5 security officers, 2 at a casino, 1 at a hotel, 1 in an apartment, and I don't remember exactly where the 5th one was, have all died because they went back to work and got sick with the coronavirus. But we want to extend our assistance out to POI members that may be experiencing some hardships, and we really want to help you. Contact helpdesk at privateofficer.com. Helpdesk at privateofficer.com. Non-members, you can contact us as well. We'll do our best to help you out. We're not financially able to help everyone. We wish that we were, but we're not. Before we take this next break, I want to ask you all to keep a longtime member and a personal friend of mine in your thoughts and prayers. Dr. Skip Grubb, a former law enforcement officer, a college professor, a police instructor, a lifetime member of POI, and a friend of mine and our team members in Nashville, experienced a major heart attack and recently, and he is still hospitalized. He's much better today than he was, but please keep him in your thoughts and prayers. And we have a lot of members and a lot of friends and acquaintances here at POI, and unfortunately, we see a lot of injuries and deaths and disasters occurring to our members and friends, and it's saddening, and we want to help them in any way that we can. If you want to support that effort, you can be on our committee. Just contact helpdesk at privateofficer.com. Helpdesk at privateofficer.com. Right now, we're considering doing several different things in our organization, including having some type of regional office or establishing a regional presence so that we can help more people. But if you want to be part, contact us, helpdesk at privateofficer.com. We're coming right back. Don't go away.
You're on your way to meet up with friends, but you can't seem to get anywhere quickly. You don't want your friends to be annoyed, so you text. You're on your way. Five seconds is the average time your eyes are off the road while texting while driving. Make sure you get where you're going.
Hey, Mom and Dad, there's a way to let your kids have fun.
And learn a skill that can save their life. That's how we got started.
That's right. My parents wanted me to feel safer around the water.
These big kids know.
Swimming is fun.
But safety, that's serious.
Studies show that formal swim lessons reduce the risk of childhood drowning by 88%.
And it's so easy to enroll. We have nearly 1,000 local partners and communities like yours who can't wait to help.
Join us today. Go to
USASwimmingFoundation.org
and click on the Find Swim Lesson.
Thank you so much for joining us back here on the Private Officer Beat Radio, talking today about apartment and hotel evictions and how private security are limited in their involvement in that process. And in fact, right now during the pandemic situation, there is a lot of protection for those people living in apartments and hotels. A lot of states have no eviction process in place right now, so they cannot be evicted. And even when the courts open back up, they're going to be log jammed with cases. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes. You probably have heard across the country large amounts of people, thousands, are demanding that the police be removed, not only from our K through 12 schools, but from universities and colleges across the country. In fact, in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins Hospital, they just formed last year their own private police department after several years of meetings and protests and people not wanting a police department on campus. They are a teaching hospital and university, but the people just didn't see the benefit of having law enforcement. Many schools saying that whenever there's a police or even a security presence, that it becomes a prison-like atmosphere for minorities, Black and Latino. And so now with what's happened with these protests, they are now demanding, by virtue of their voice and threats, to be honest, that schools remove all SROs and even private security from their campuses. And in the event that a school does not remove law enforcement or security, that they are to be disarmed. Now, some schools in the U.S. do have unarmed police officers, not from the city or county, but if they have their own internal police department, then they have unarmed, as is the case in Baltimore and several other cities. They are sworn police officers, but they are not armed. The University of Rhode Island has gone for years with campus police officers with full police authority, but unarmed. And you have that in other neighborhoods, in other cities and towns and states across the country. Texas is one of those states that has a very large campus police presence in all of their schools, because the independent school districts have authority by statute to have their own police department. And so they do. Many school systems in Texas have their own police department. The same is true in California. Many school districts in California have their own police department, and other states as well. And we're going to talk about this, heads up, next week. We'll be talking in depth about school security and school police and the move to remove them and what that's going to mean to the protection of life and property, as well as how can it benefit the private security industry besides going in as a guard force, because they don't want guards any more than they want police. They want no guns. They want no one with authority. They want no one who's going to challenge them, no one that's going to apprehend, detain, enforce. And so we'll talk more and more and more about that next week. Be sure to be listening next Monday, live from the Gulf Coast of Alabama. We'll be broadcasting live from the sunny shores of Alabama on the Gulf Coast, and we'll bring that to you during our regular show Monday next week. Today, we also need to kind of talk about some of the other issues that we are seeing in security that continues to occur over and over and over again. I've noticed in recent weeks that security officers are not taking precautions to secure and keep themselves safe, not only from the virus, but from attacks. One of the leading causes of security officer deaths over the years that we've been doing this as an association has been incidents that have occurred when the security officer did not have good situational awareness, was not prepared, was playing on his phone, talking to other people, so on and so forth. Now, even though many businesses have been closed because of the COVID-19 pandemic, there's still a lot of things happening involving private security, because there's still a lot of private security securing those empty buildings, patrolling certain downtown areas, working in grocery stores and other retail establishments that are open. And we've seen in the last couple of weeks a number of incidents where security officers was not prepared, was not attentive to their surroundings, and they wound up being injured quite severely. We teach, we preach, we holler, we scream, we jump up and down often about this subject. But it's difficult to get people to understand the seriousness of it, especially when you're working on a property, let's say a construction site, where it's boring. If you're working out there, especially in the overnight hours, and it's dark, and it's cold, and you haven't slept much, maybe a few hours, and the body is geared to sleep at night. So when the sun goes down and the moon comes up and you're slumped low into your vehicle in the parking lot of some construction site, it's normal for the body to want to go to sleep, to rest, especially if you haven't gotten good sleep in a while. And although I have been in that situation and I have nodded off, and I've said that before, thank goodness it wasn't for hours, it was for minutes. But, the body is prone to do that at night, regardless, even if you have a lot of sleep. Unless you're actively moving around, drink coffee or caffeine, stay alert, you're going to nod off. And this is a dangerous, dangerous time. In recent years, we've had numerous security officers killed. There was a situation, we still have this video and play it during our training. It was a security officer in Houston, Texas, outside of a convenience store. He was sitting in his marked patrol car. He was armed. But whatever he was doing, he lost sight of his surroundings. A lot of people do not have good peripheral vision. They're not conscious of what really is happening behind him or around them, and they are looking forward, kind of like tunnel vision, and that's a dangerous thing to have. And so in this particular situation, two people snuck through the back end of the property in the darkness and eluded the security officer. And they were able to get right up to him and kill him and take his gun for no other reason. And this is not the first time. In North Carolina, up in the Raleigh, North Carolina area a couple of years ago, a security officer in the parking lot in front of the store of a grocery store, and a teenager was in the woods nearby, a little patch of woods that was following the security officer's every move. And he was hunting the security officer. And at the right time, after quite a long time actually, they were able to go back to surveillance video footage and see this teenager in the woods and how long he was going back and forth like a mountain lion. And eventually he found the right moment. He attacked the security officer from behind, took his gun, and killed him. And these incidents happen a lot, and we've seen it just recently where security officers were attacked from behind in two different situations. One was shot, one was just punched until he was unconscious. I'm telling you right now that situational awareness is got to be second nature. You got to have it all the time, and you got to be aware of your surroundings. We're coming right back. You are listening to the Private Officer Beat Radio.
Without this woman, my father couldn't have had his hip replaced.
Without these people, I'd be dead.
This man helped my son through leukemia.
Do something amazing. Give blood.
For some children, America isn't the land of promise. It's a place where every day is a struggle. Because today in America, 1 in 6 children lives below the poverty line. For these children, living in poverty means going without medicine, going without food, going without a warm home, or even a roof over your head. And that's life for nearly 13 million children of all races, all across America. Where will you draw the line and get involved? You can help these children and their families find a way out of poverty for good. And you can make a difference in more ways than you think. Will you help? Go to povertyusa.org today. Because 1 in 6 children in poverty is one too many. A message from the Catholic Campaign for Human Development.
Welcome back to the Private Officer Beat Radio. This week, for just a few minutes, we want to talk about how security officers can legally assist property owners and property management companies with legal evictions. As I had said earlier in the program, this is not the first time the topic has come up. It's actually been reoccurring over the last 5 years or so, but especially in times when the economy is experiencing a slowdown, when a lot of people are out of work. We saw this in 2007 and 2008, and we saw it again back around 2017, 2016, and now again, 4 years later, we're experiencing another time in history when there's going to be a large volume of evictions across the country as millions, literally millions and millions of people, 40 million or more now, of people are unemployed, out of work, unable to pay their bills, unable to feed themselves and their children, unable to support their family, and thus unable to pay their rent. And we're going to see in the next couple of months a large amount, tens and tens of thousands and thousands of people being evicted across the country. Now, during the coronavirus pandemic, governors in most states, probably all states, have put a moratorium on evictions, saying, no, you cannot evict anyone even if they don't pay you, and you cannot force them to leave. You cannot cut off their utilities. You cannot cut off their water. You cannot do anything that would force them to have to move, and that includes what's called constructive eviction, and that's when the landlord uses extreme measures to force the people out of the property, out of the apartment or unit. Security officers, probably in the last 20 years, definitely since the recession of 2007 and 8 and 9, have been involved in the eviction process on a limited basis. And even when I had a larger security company myself, we did, for property management companies, serve certain properties all of the 7 or 10 day notices as required by law in that state, instead of the property manager. That would help them. It really kind of put us in the middle between the tenant and the property manager, and that made us the bad guy and not the property manager. So we would do that. We stood by a few times during evictions where they physically hauled property out of the tenant's apartment or condo, and we've also escorted property managers and personnel to the apartment to give them a final eviction or to, tell them to get out, or they were going to be thrown out by the sheriff's department. In every state, there is a process of eviction. It's not as easy as putting a notice to vacate on a door and then tomorrow start throwing their stuff out on the sidewalk. In every state, there is a legal process that you must go through. In most states, the process is this. You're going to give them a 7 or 10 day notice, voluntarily allowing them to vacate. You're going to put that on their door. If they don't vacate in 7 or 10 days, you still cannot throw them out of the property. Your next step is to go down to the civil division of the court and file a lawsuit or a vacate procedure. Then the sheriff's department serves that notice to the tenant that they have to appear in court. Some bigger cities have housing court. All they do all day, every day, all year, every year is to listen to disputes between landowners, property management companies, and tenants who haven't paid their rent or lease in quite some time. So they may have a housing court where you live, and you'll go down, and the property manager or owner will go down along with the tenant, and they will hear the case. Well, why didn't you, Mr. Smith, pay your rent? What was the problem? And, of course, many times tenants will find problems. The heater never worked right. The AC never worked right. There was a leak under the sink. There's mold in the apartment. This, that, and the other thing. They try to come up with some reason that justifies them not paying the rent and hopefully hoping that the judge will side with them and say, even though you've been there for 18 months without paying rent, Mr. Jones, Mr. Smith, even though you've been there for 8, 9, 10 months, never paid rent, and you owe this man $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 or more, I'm going to side with you because the heater wasn't working right, or there was a little bit of what you said was mold somewhere along the way. No, it doesn't work that way. So if a judgment is given, an order is given by the judge to vacate, they still have usually another 30 days at that point. So let's say they haven't paid their rent in 6 months. And then they get served by the sheriff's department because you file a case against them. And they go to court. Now they have another 30 days to vacate. It could wind up to be a very lengthy process, and sometimes it can be more than a year that this lingers on. Right now, during this situation with so many people out of work, we know that even after the landlord or property owner files that legal eviction, goes through the legal eviction process, that the courts are so backed up. There's so many tens of thousands of cases in every state that we're talking about well into 2021 before the courts will be able to hear most of these cases. And so what's going to happen? In the meantime, they've already been there 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 months without paying rent. Now they're going to be allowed to stay another 3 or 4 or 6 months, again, without not paying the rent, and it's all going to be all fine and legal. So even if they have an income, and by the way, we should inject here that many people did receive stimulus packages. They did receive money, $1,200 for the individual, each individual. So if it's you and your wife, you and your girlfriend, and you have 4 or 5 kids, you're looking at a substantial amount of money up front that could have paid for them to move to another location, but they chose to stay in the free apartment rather than get one where they had to pay rent. So now you have them really at this point being nothing more than squatters, and they're out doing whatever they do every day. And now 3, 4, 5 months after you file the proper procedure paperwork, now you might have a hearing, and another 30 days might be given to them to move out. It's a very, very long and tedious process. Many of them know the process. They've done it. They've been through it before, and it's almost like a game for them. So, once an order has been delivered to move and that 30 days expired, if they still haven't moved out, a security officer cannot legally assist with the move-out procedure in many states because you actually have to have the sheriff's department physically move them out onto the sidewalk. And in some states, the sheriff's department actually uses trustees from the jail to do the physical labor while the sheriff's deputies stand by and oversee and make sure everything is calm and collective and stays orderly. Security officers cannot take it upon themselves, even under the order of the manager, to enter the apartment without the sheriff's department being there in many states. So, number one advice for you is make sure that you truly understand and know the law of your state, how it operates, how it doesn't operate, what you can do as the agent of the property, and what you cannot do. We've seen security companies arrested, the owners and their employees. We've seen security officers arrested, and this is not once or twice. This is, half a dozen or more times in the last few years. It's important that you not only understand the law, but that you abide by it, regardless of what your client wants you to do, what your property manager wants you to do, because they're not the ones being arrested. It'll be you. They're not the one that'll have a criminal record even after it's dropped or dismissed, and the prosecutor decides not to prosecute. You're still going to have a record. Even if you expunge it, that paper trail is always going to be there, even though many people don't realize that. So those are the things that you can do. You can help. Once the sheriff's department comes, you can stand by with the property manager. You can go in and inspect the property, the apartment, the condo, even the commercial building, as long as you have permission from the manager and that person, individual, family has been served with a 30-day notice and they are beyond that 30-day court notice. Now let's talk about another area that's very touchy and, again, can easily get security personnel in a whole lot of trouble, and that is long-stay hotels. Now, there are two types of hotels, motels in the country. There are long-stay, short-stay. Most hotels, motels offer nightly reservations. Some, quite a few actually, offer long-term residency. In many states, once you've been there for a certain amount of time or spent a certain amount of money, it's no longer considered a week-to-week or day-to-day occupancy. You're no longer just a guest. You become a physical resident. And so many, many, many long stays, in-town suites, extended stay America, homestead suites, Candlewood suites, Town Place suites, Staybridge, Homewood, Resident Inn, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. There's a lot of long stay properties. Even though they may start off as a few days or a week or 2 weeks, like I said, in most states, once it goes beyond a certain amount of time, they're not a guest on a day-to-day or week-to-week. They're actually a resident, just like an apartment. And in a lot of cases where the hotels try to evict these people for not paying rent, they get in trouble because they violated their rights. They didn't go through the legal process, the same process as evicting anyone from a condominium or an apartment. So as a security officer that might be working at a hotel, especially a long stay, you need to really be careful as to what the law says. Now, during this particular time, the pandemic, again, governors and mayors in all states have put some limits on evictions, even from hotels. So if they are staying in a long-term hotel, it's the same deal as with an apartment. They cannot be evicted without going through that court process. And you cannot turn off the utilities, the water, the AC, or anything else that would be, a form of eviction or forceful eviction. As a security officer, it is best not to legally force yourself upon that particular area of the eviction, not to get involved with that particular area of the eviction. Protect the property manager, protect the property from burglary, vandalism, things of that nature. Do your job, but leave the evictions up to the court. I know, I've heard this before from other security officers and security companies. We can do this. We can do this. It's legal, perfectly legal. You know, unless you're a lawyer, unless you have a degree in law, unless you really have studied the civil portion of the law, you're probably going to wind up in some sort of trouble. And we certainly would not want to see that. Evictions is a civil, not a criminal matter, even if they're on the property after they haven't paid the rent. They cannot be arrested for trespassing. Now, on the other hand, if this is a hotel or motel that's nightly and they have to pay every night and they don't offer long-term, well, that's a different story. Now you can not only evict them, you can help show them the way to the door. Again, be careful that this business is not offering any type of long-term and has never offered any type of long-term and is only, pay by night, hotel or motel. Then that's going to be a whole different story. That's going to end it for this edition of the Private Officer Beat, and we really do appreciate you being here. Be sure to go to our website at privateofficer.org and sign up for membership today and receive more than 45 benefits. And also, be sure to check out our friends at Body Armor USA. We've got what it takes to protect you. Until the next time, friends, be safe, be blessed. We'll see you back here on the radio.